Coinbase beefing with the SEC. Remember that story? All right. Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, spoke today, walked back a little bit of the we're taking our ball and going home vibes that had previously been channeled, but still poking some shots at SEC and Chairman Gary Gensler. Now, the SEC still has to respond to the latest from Coinbase as mandated by a judge. So we're waiting on that any old day now. But yeah, Brian Armstrong still poking at the bear that is the SEC and Gary Gensler, but also toning it down a little bit. So not full out war of words. We're leaving the US. We'll see what happens. But I don't know. Suggest something about the whole story for sure. So I'm going to toss it to Will. What do you think?
I guess I'm a Brian Armstrong whisperer because I called this. I said it was posturing last time, right? Like, and it totally was. All this was posturing. Coinbase has probably invested more in U.S. infrastructure, meaning licensing in the regime of the SEC and other government regulators than any other crypto company out there, right? They're the first company to really go public for crypto, minus a bunch of other Bitcoin mining companies, which will kind of like waft off to the side. That was a monumental moment for crypto in April 2021 when Coinbase did go public. And they do have a lot of these other licenses, which CoinDesk has covered ad nauseum in a lot of different articles talking about all the different licenses they need to be able to function as an exchange, as a custodian, as sort of like a neobank within the US. So no, they were not ever going to leave the US. But that doesn't mean they can't be opportunistic and set up like a side entity and move offshores. And that's what we're doing right now with this Bermuda thing, right? They're opening up this Bermuda derivatives exchange at the moment. And they're going to be able to take in a lot of revenue that way and just sort of diversify themselves and also sort of take advantage of this regulatory arbitrage that we've seen Binance do for quite some time, right? Coinbase has eschewed away from that for good reason. Didn't really make sense at the time. They tried to stay in line and be good. The SEC seemed like it was playing ball. Then they weren't all of a sudden, so Coinbase had to pivot. And now they sort of have two business lines. Like they have a US business line with Coinbase, and they have like this offshore one, which they're going to build with derivatives. Both are going to be lucrative. So I'm not, feeling bad for Brian right now. I am happy that they're leading the charge in this. I would say they're also not alone. There are some other crypto companies that are going after the SEC. Jen, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think when we look at Brian's comments, we have to think about the stakeholders here, right? And I immediately think about the customers and the shareholders. And I don't have exact numbers in front of me, but I've read multiple publications that the majority of Coinbase's customers are in the US, right? And so for Brian Armstrong, for Coinbase to be out there saying, we're looking at going overseas, we may be looking at not staying in the US because of regulatory uncertainty, I think makes customers afraid and it makes shareholders afraid. And so I think this totally makes sense when we look at all of the stakeholders in Coinbase's ecosystem and where Coinbase is currently getting their revenue from. So this makes sense. The other side of this story, I think that Brian Armstrong and Coinbase being at the head of this fight for regulatory clarity in the US is honestly like a marketing campaign in the making. Last year, we spoke so much about exchanges gaining trust, and we saw that kind of blow up in everyone's face at the end of last year. But if Coinbase is able to get regulatory clarity and be very public about it right now, I think they're going to win over the next generation of crypto users when it comes to trust. They're going to be able to say, we led this charge, we got clarity, and at the end of the day, you guys are who's important to us. So that's what I took away from this, Zach.
Yeah, there's no one else really in the US, right? It's their game to lose. And I think Coinbase has invested heavily in the US, has always been, hey, we're US based. We want to comply with regulators. It's just that the regulators haven't really followed suit, right? They've been asking for this clarity for years. They've failed to respond to a petition, all this stuff, right? But I think in the long term, the investment in the US market will likely pay off for Coinbase. And likely they see that as well, right? So when Brian Armstrong previously was like, hey, we're leaving. And then today he's like, no, we're not. Of course, that makes sense. And shout out to Will for calling it. But yeah, they're going to have to go elsewhere to get some of these more attractive business opportunities in front of them. And that's what we've seen with this Bermuda thing and this derivatives exchange thing. They can reach a more degenerate audience of people who want that 5X, right? Want those options to be able to trade through Coinbase. So we might see more of that, more dabbling in the things that can only be offered offshore, while also retaining a strong footprint in the US because it's their game to lose, right? Binance US is floundering relative to Coinbase. The others out there aren't as strong, aren't as widely known, aren't on TV, to be honest, talking about why the existing system is kind of janky, right? So I think Coinbase sees that its long-term prospects are best suited in the US. They're going to try to advance this narrative. The SEC is an impediment to that, but they're not gonna pull up stakes and head elsewhere. They're in a tough spot messaging wise, and I think that's why we're seeing sort of the backpedaling a little bit in these most recent statements. But I don't know. There will certainly be more. Very much looking to see what the SEC says in its response to Coinbase's petition.